have a quorum present, so we can proceed. And I would say, remind members that the record will remain open for 5 legislative days so that members can submit any materials that they wish to be included into the record. Today, our committee is going to consider really one important item. The committee resolution before us will be amending the Members Congressional Handbook to provide more clarity on current regulations governing the use of official resources, as well as adding new review requirements. This committee resolution will also be directing the Chief Administrative Officer, the CAO, to submit to the committee a proposal on how we would improve the transparency of House expenditures in the quarterly statements of disbursements. It also directs the CAO to review its own internal finance procedures and to provide the committee with a complete report on how their finance department complies with the committee's voucher documentation standards. This committee, of course, is charged with overseeing the day-to-day operations of the House, and it's a responsibility that I know each of us take very seriously. Members of this institution, each one of us elected by our constituents and taxpayers, and each of us are accountable to them. We're all sent here to Washington to represent their views and to advocate on their behalf, and that requires our actions to reflect their interests, all of our actions, not just how we vote on the floor of the House, but certainly how we spend our official representational budgets, or as commonly called here on the Hill, our MRAs. Members and their staff have to be held accountable to their constituencies. And our committee is a part of our responsibility, certainly, is to help provide for that accountability. So in conjunction with the House Committee on Ethics, House Leadership, and other entities like the CAO, we work to ensure that tax dollars are spent in the most efficient, accountable, and transparent way. And we accomplish this by establishing and regularly reviewing and updating the regulations governing how official resources might be used. We also try to educate House officers about these regulations and working with the CAO to help ensure compliance of our regulations and to improve public transparency of all of these expenditures. And of course, like any other entity, we're not immune from individuals who break the rules. We certainly can't force individuals to always do the right thing, but we can make it easier to hold them accountable if they don't. And as everyone here is aware, there were some recent questions surrounding a particular member's use of official resources. Specifically, questions related to the use of official resources for car mileage reimbursement, furnishings and decorations in the Washington, D.C. office, as well as the use of charter flights. And I would want to be very, very clear here. The resolution that is being considered today is not suggestive. It is not suggestive of this particular member's culpability. This was not an investigation into a particular member's use of official resources. This is not an investigative body. The resolution that we are considering today is a result of this committee's internal review of our own regulations and assessments on ways that we can just improve them. However, it was because of this incident that raised a lot of questions. It initiated our complete bipartisan, and let me stress that, bipartisan review of current regulations, as well as House processes and enforcement practices for officials' expenditures. And in response, we established an official review group that was led by committee members Rodney Davis, who did an outstanding job, and I certainly want to thank him, and his counterpart, Zoe Lofgren, the gentlelady from California. Both of them were former congressional staffers, an interesting thing, and who knew better, really, on how our processes worked. They had so much experience in managing office operations and expenditures. So again, I want to thank them sincerely, and I will tell you also, this resolution that we're looking at today is essentially their work product. Everybody on this committee has helped, but it was really them. They've been the lead. They conducted a very thorough review, starting with a complete examination of the regulations in the Members Congressional Handbook. Specifically, they examined ways that could clarify or tighten regulations, reduce any gray areas. The review group met with House stakeholders. They met with members. They met with chiefs of staff, individual member office financial administrators, employees within the Office of Finance, and various other entities, and focused again on House transparency. And after completing their review and taking into consideration the feedback that they collected, they identified ways that we can strengthen as a committee, and clarify our regulations and improve the transparency of House expenditures. Again, the resolution being considered by the committee today reflects their recommendations and directs additional evaluation of House processes that might warrant future changes as well. Always look to the future. The resolution, effective immediately upon adoption, if the committee adopts today, will modify the Members' Congressional Handbook to clarify what type of car mileage is qualified for reimbursement, specifically limiting it to a depreciable asset that you or your family members personally own or personally lease, so that there's no confusion. And it also adds new thresholds for certain charter flights that will now require prior approval by this committee. As well, the resolution clarifies the regulations for office furniture. Currently, the Members' Handbook states that furniture is not reimbursable for the Washington, D.C. Congressional office, and this remains the same. The resolution would require committee approval for a furniture item in the district office if it costs more than $5,000 per item. And for decorating expenses, only a purchase of nominal value, such as frames or bookends or what have you, have ever been allowed within our current Members' Handbook. This remains the same. In the limited case of fixtures, the member's office must obtain approval from the committee for an item exceeding $5,000. However, again, all decorations should be of nominal value. And in addition to modifying the Members' Congressional Handbook, the resolution also involves a CAO, who is our partner in transparency and helping to ensure that our regulations are followed and that each taxpayer dollar is properly spent. This resolution directs the CAO to create a plan to increase the transparency of office expenditures. It also directs the CAO to conduct a complete review of its finance procedures and to report back to our committee on how it complies with the stringent documentation standards established by our committee. And I always have said to my staff, I tell them all the time, that the largest room is a room for improvement. And that means that the reforms that we adopt today will likely not be the last that this committee ever adopts, and that we will continue to review our regulations as we always do. With that, I would now like to recognize my colleague and the committee's ranking member, Mr. Brady, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, for the purpose of his opening statement. And I would just say again that this review has been extremely bipartisan. The ranking member and I have had a number of conversations about it, and I think we have worked well together, as have our review committee. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for holding this meeting. I have a longer statement for the record, but want to underline the important work this committee does in making sure public funds and other official resources are used properly. Also, I'd like to commend Ms. Lofgren and Mr. Davis for taking the lead on behalf of the committee on this project. I very much appreciate the work of the bipartisan staff that has happened here. Their work has produced some overdue changes to our regulations and will give the taxpayers greater transparency in how our tax dollars are spent. Madam Chairman, I'd like to submit my full statement for the record, and thank you again for having this meeting.
Thank the gentleman very much, and I'd now like to recognize Congressman Rodney Davis. Again, I want to thank him so much for all of his work. There's been a number of months and hours and really a dedicated commitment to looking into this entire process. And this work product, as I say, is really essentially Congressman Davis's and Congresswoman Lofgren's as well.
Well, thank you.
Gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. As members of Congress, it's our duty to be good stewards with the tax dollars that we are entrusted with. And this internal process, I believe, was to make sure we uphold that duty. I'd like to again thank Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brady, for allowing us to lead this review process. And I want to send a special thanks to my colleague, Ms. Lofgren, who was my partner in this review process. And we would not have gotten to this point without everybody's bipartisan cooperation, and my thanks go to each of you. As the financial administrator for a member of Congress for 16 years, this is an issue that's personal to me too. These are issues that I faced when I submitted the paperwork that goes throughout the process that we're reviewing today. Ms. Lofgren and I went through a comprehensive review that engaged members, staff, member financial administrators, member office financial administrators, management of the office of the CAO, various transparency groups, and also the Ethics Committee. While our review found no broad patterns of abuse or fraud, we did find areas that we can improve on, many of those mentioned in Chairman Miller's opening statements. Specifically, we need to create more transparency. We need to make sure that we improve the way our expenses are disclosed on the quarterly statements of disbursement, updating the regulations and the guidelines of the member handbook, and providing further clarity and education jointly with the Ethics Committee to members of what the responsible use of the MRA entails. The House of Representatives is committed to taking the necessary steps to create that transparent system that ensures taxpayer dollars used to perform official and representational duties are being spent responsibly and within the guidelines of our House rules. I want to remind this committee and those who are in attendance that the executive and the judicial branches do not have the same expense transparency requirements imposed on themselves. As we are the people's house with the constitutional authority to control the purse, we hold ourselves to the highest standards to ensure we are responsible with taxpayer money. The committee resolution we will vote on shortly is the result of our comprehensive review and will make the necessary changes to fulfill our commitment to a more transparent, accountable, and responsible House. Again, I'd like to thank my colleague Zoe Lofgren for being a great partner throughout this process, and also, in closing, thank you again, Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brady, for giving me this opportunity to help improve this great institution. Now I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for his comments, and I would now recognize the gentlelady from California, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thanks also to Mr. Brady for your efforts in getting this review started, and certainly to my colleague, Mr. Davis, who has worked very diligently with me to try and come to a conclusion. We've reviewed a lot of documents, interviewed senior leadership in the CAO's office, as well as meeting with outside sunshine groups who play a valuable role in looking at the institution, and they all shared proposals with us. We've talked to other members, House staff, about what we could do to improve House operations, and I think today is a very good start. As we've noticed, there's more work to do, and it's my understanding that the chairwoman is considering holding additional meetings to continue the work of modernizing and reforming the regulations for how members spend tax dollars, and that's really good news, and I look forward to working with all of my colleagues here on the committee to make sure that we improve how the House does business. As Mr. Davis and you have referenced, this is a bipartisan effort. You know, our Democratic leader sometimes says, show a little love. And what that means is let other versions exist. Sometimes you have an idea and another person, but when you really sort through it, you can come to a conclusion because you're really trying to get the same thing done. And that's really what this is a product of. We've put common sense conditions on the appropriate use of charter aircraft in a way we've sorted through the issues so it works, we think, in a way without being bureaucratic to members who have very rural districts. We've put limits on how members can use tax dollars to decorate their offices. And as the chairwoman has mentioned, we already have a prohibition on using MRAs for things that are beyond what the House provides. We'll find out how that happened in a separate outside review for the one flamboyant instance where that did not occur, but we've emphasized that that is the rule, and the expectation is that we would live with that rule. We've changed documentation, and I think most importantly, we are going to continue a commitment to transparency by putting office statements of disbursement online in a searchable and sortable format, which gives the data more meaning and the taxpayers additional tools. Because the more eyes we have on this, the better off we all are. Now, I think most members of Congress, want to play by the rules. The last thing you want is a mess in your office. So we need to be clear on what the rules are so that people can live up to them. Even though the resolution we're considering has many good changes, I do have one amendment I'm going to offer on something we couldn't come to an agreement on, and maybe we can through the amendment process. But I do think this resolution, with the exception of that one amendment, strikes the right balance between giving members the tools they need and the taxpayers' confidence that the tax money is being spent wisely. And I think it was a good process, and I thank the chairwoman for yielding to me.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the committee that wish to offer an opening statement? Okay. I will now call before the committee our first agenda item, Committee Resolution 114. This is a committee resolution amending the committee's regulations and to instruct the CAO. And without objection, the first reading of this resolution is dispensed with, and the resolution is considered read and open for amendment at any point. Now, as I mentioned, this resolution will first modify the Members' Congressional Handbook to clarify what type of car mileage is qualified for reimbursement. Currently, the Members' Congressional Handbook says that travel via a privately owned or privately leased vehicle while on official or representational business is reimbursable at a rate per mile basis. This resolution will apply a new, very specific definition for privately owned vehicles for the purpose of mileage reimbursement. The new definition makes it clear that to be considered privately owned and eligible for mileage reimbursement, the car must be a depreciable asset that is owned by either the member or the staff using the car or one of their immediate family members. Now, obviously, this would preclude mileage reimbursement for a vehicle that might be owned by a campaign. That has never been allowed for taxpayers to reimburse that. But again, we just want to make it clear. This resolution will also add a new threshold for charter flights. Our current regulations allow for the use of official resources for members and staff to travel aboard chartered aircraft, again, only for official business. Today's resolution will add new pre-approval requirements for chartered flights. Going forward, any charter flight to and from Washington, D.C. will require prior approval from this committee, as will any charter flight over $7,500. This travel to and from D.C. is intended to only be used when an emergency arises. Regarding charter flights, we need to take into account, as has been said here already, that you have many members of Congress who represent extremely expansive districts, maybe an entire state, with locations that are simply not serviced by commercial airlines, and they need to be able to travel throughout their district. So for some of our colleagues, flying smaller chartered flights is actually the most effective means of transportation. But again, to prevent any misuse of official resources for charter flights, this committee will now need to approve flights that meet the criteria that has been mentioned. Ones originating from Washington versus a member's congressional district, and again, flights that cost over $7,500. Also, this resolution will add a new threshold for office furniture and decorating purchases that will now require prior approval for this committee, from this committee before certain purchases can be made. Going forward, again, any furniture item or decorating item that exceeds $5,000 must receive approval by this committee. Again, I want to note, as has been mentioned, we keep reiterating it here, our current regulations prohibit the use of official resources to furnish your Washington, D.C. offices. And in addition to improving our regulations by adding clarity and greater review, one goal of this resolution is to improve transparency of House expenditures, and that will be accomplished in two very meaningful ways. First, it calls on the CAO to develop a plan to include a more detailed breakdown of travel expenses. Currently, all travel-related expenses reported in the statements of disbursements are now bundled into one line item, which means that you really don't know how much was spent on flights or mileage reimbursement or lodging or what have you. And going forward, these line items will be broken down. Secondly, the CAO will be required to present the committee with a plan to publish the statements of disbursement electronically, again, as been mentioned, in a searchable, sortable format, unlike what is currently the less user-friendly format that we have online today. And then finally, this resolution directs the CAO to review and explain how its Office of Finance complies with our documentation standards. This review, we think, is very, very important because with each purchase that an office makes, depending on the type of purchase and the amount of the purchase, certain documentation is required for justification. And we just need to make sure that those documents are being collected and reviewed in the Finance Department. I certainly think, and I think we all pretty much agree, these are very common sense revisions that will help provide more clarity to the current regulations and establish what we think is appropriate pre-approval requirements. Certainly, the new transparency directives included in this resolution, as well as the additional review of the CAO's financial processes, are steps forward, very important steps forward toward improving public access and insight on how official resources are spent, and of course that ultimately improves accountability. Once again, I just want to thank our review team for their recommendations. I look forward to seeing the plans put forth by the CAO, and I would recognize Mr. Brady if he has any statement on the resolution. All right. Would any member like to offer an amendment to this resolution?
Madam Chair,
The gentlelady from California is
I
recognized.
have an amendment number 2.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes to speak in favor of her amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you have outlined the resolution, I think there is much merit in what we have before us. I think we will have more transparency and more accountability, so that is a good thing. The one thing that we did not come to agreement on is greater detail on the voucher documentation standards for mileage. Now, right now, you really can't find out very much about where someone is going or on what day. And I am mindful that we've received a letter to you from the Sergeant at Arms expressing concern about details in the statement of disbursements about members' travel itinerary, providing a clue to where a member may be at a given time. And quoting from the letter, it says, while the statement of disbursements lists past travel, one could conceivably review the material to determine a pattern, and once a pattern is identified, an individual could more accurately pinpoint a routine or frequently traveled route, thus enhancing a member's vulnerability to unwanted encounters. I appreciate that the Sergeant at Arms' job is to keep us safe, but I did something last night just to see whether it was doable. I went on the internet, and in about 10 minutes, I could find the home address of members of this committee. So we're fooling ourselves if we think that putting the taxpayers' money being used for a route is somehow keeping us safe, when in about 10 minutes somebody can find out where we live. And as we all know, we have no security in our homes. So I just think the Sergeant of Arms, while doing his job, is overreacting and to the detriment of sunshine. I had 3 amendments, and the first amendment would specifically provide for point-to-point disclosure. I'm not going to offer that in view of the Sergeant at Arms letter. But amendment number 2, which I am offering, would provide for the name of the travel, the dates of the travel or period during which the travel occurred, not to exceed a month, the locations of travel expressed in general terms, for example, your district office, which everyone knows, it's on the internet, to a zip code, so that people would have an idea of where you're going. It would be a general idea, but at least there'd be some sunshine on it, and the number of miles traveled in each journey and the mileage rate. I think this would increase the transparency of this, and I think it's meritorious. I understand we just couldn't come to agreement in the course of our otherwise very collegial effort, but I do think this is meritorious. I think it deals with the issue that I disagree with raised by the Sergeant at Arms, and so I offer the amendment and recommend that we do one further step on transparency in the matter I've suggested. And I would also ask unanimous consent to put amendment 1 and 3 that I'm not offering into the record of the proceedings.
Without objection. And I would also, if I could respond to the gentlelady, I'd also ask UC to enter into the record this letter that you did reference there from Paul Irving, who's our Sergeant at Arms. Without objection, so ordered. But and he does specify here about security concerns that he has, and I'm in opposition to the gentlelady's amendment. And again, I'm very appreciative of all the work that you've done on this, and I think we have just taken such a huge step forward. You know, one of the other hats I wear, I'm the Vice Chair of the Homeland Security Committee, and perhaps I've sat in too many classified briefings. And I know there's not a lot of sympathy for members of Congress, but there is a security risk. And I think when you have a letter from the Sergeant at Arms pointing something like this out, we should take this gentleman's comments to heart. I think that there will be much greater transparency, or certainly accountability, let me say that, accountability in the Finance Department with the voucher system, et cetera. And I just feel that this is a step that is not necessary. But again, I'm appreciative of the gentlelady offering the amendment. I will be opposing this particular amendment. And are there any other members that wish to comment on the amendment?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, gentleman from
I
Florida, former sheriff.
I appreciate that. I truly want to express my gratitude to Ms. Lofgren and to Rodney Davis for working so diligently on putting this together. Long overdue. I think we'd all agree that there's probably other things that we should do as we move forward, whether it's leased vehicles and some of the excesses that we've seen in the past, but that's not what we're talking about today. I will tell you, coming from a state of Florida that probably has the most open, transparent record system in the United States, but even they saw the need to safeguard law enforcement by not putting their addresses on public documents. Causes you a problem when you go to refinance a home, because when they go to public document search, they can't find you. But that's a safety concern, and I think the state of Florida, like I said, it has the most open, transparent record system in America, has decided, you know, we need to protect those folks. I think that's part of the problem that we see today across this country in regards to, you know, folks that are just upset with government per se. And I worry, and I agree with the Sergeant at Arms, that when you do this and put it on the net, that it does create an additional concern for those of us who are serving. And you know, if questioned, obviously we put the detail in to our folks, and then they transcribe it and put it into for the disbursement, for the statement of disbursements. So that backup information's there in case there ever is a question, whether it comes to ethics or something else. I would suggest that all members keep that information, and I would think most do, because none of us want to have an ethics complaint against us or an FBI coming in and seizing your records. None of that we want to see happen. But I do think that where we are today with the hatred that's out there, particularly towards government and government officials, we need to be very, very careful. And I would suggest that we do follow the recommendation of the Sergeant at Arms. While he is responsible for our safety, and Ms. Lofgren stated it, that they don't provide security at your home. And so your travel methods, you know, we used to tell law enforcement, change your travel methods. Don't take the same route to work every day. Do things that if someone wants to hurt you, it makes it more difficult for them to do that. And I would suggest the same thing holds for members of Congress. And I'd be glad to yield. Yes.
I appreciate that. And I think none of us wants members of Congress to be unsafe. I mean, and you're right, there are people who are unhinged. We certainly remember our colleague, Gabby Gifford, who was shot in the head. Of course, that was at a publicized meeting, which all of us go and do. I just put on the radar screen here, I fly home every week just like everybody else. And you can go on United Airlines, and 2 days in advance, and you can see my name. It's on the seat I'm in, and anybody can see it. It's, you know, so I don't think, if we think that we are anonymous in terms of our travel, we're not. And I think that it would be very helpful to have it, you know, posted for the public. That's just, I realize we have a disagreement here, yeah. But I just point out this information is in some cases already available.
Well, I would suggest, though, reclaiming my time,
I yield back,
is that we should err on the side of caution. If anything, from what we've seen, violence in America today, we really ought to err on the side of caution. While I understand the transparency issue, I think that in our office records, it clearly is there if anyone wanted to see it or check. And I think by things that you're doing in regards to separating, you know, air reimbursement for flights, for mileage, I think that then opens up that transparency that we're looking at. Because when you see a member that has this huge number, and you can pull up other members and see everybody else is relatively in this category, and you got one guy or gal way up here, that in and of itself might draw some scrutiny, I would think. And I think by putting it online, it certainly opens that up to scrutiny. Madam Chair, once again, I really do appreciate all the work that Ms. Lofgren and the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis, has done as it relates to opening this process up for transparency. And with that, I yield back, and I oppose that amendment.
Thank the gentleman. Any other members?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Chairman. Again, the changes that we've made towards openness, transparency have been phenomenal. And to have only one area of disagreement, I think, is a testament to how well this committee worked together in a bipartisan fashion. Now, I too oppose this amendment. Obviously, we wouldn't have had this disagreement if I didn't. And I appreciate the comments. I appreciate that Mr. Nugent made as a former law enforcement official. I think his comments need to be taken into serious consideration, as the letter from the Sergeant at Arms, Mr. Irving. But let me address a few other issues that I think are pertinent to this debate. I appreciate the fact that people know where we live. I would argue, because of my security system at home, because of other methods that I can protect myself and my family with, I'm much safer at home than I am traveling throughout my district doing my representational duties. So if somebody having my home address, I feel a little bit safer there than I do out on the road at different public events. And our public schedule, and many times, is released. So, Ms. Lofgren, you're right. Many individuals can have access to where we're going. Frankly, I had an experience where I had a group of individuals come talk to me about a very important issue to them at a public meeting, and while I was on my way to another publicly disclosed meeting, they decided to visit my home and deliver that same message to my then 12-year-old son. These are issues that we face as members of Congress, and it's bullying tactics like that that I think are becoming more prevalent in today's day and age. Now, if security issues don't really concern you as a member of Congress, if those issues don't concern you, what's great is the processes we have in place right now, you can already, by your expense reimbursements, by each voucher request that you submit, you can individualize every single trip. You can put the detail on there. You can individualize it, make an individual expense reimbursement for every single mileage trip that you want to put in there. So those members who want to do that can do it. And I will give you an example. When the travel substance category came into effect a few years ago, while I was a financial administrator for a member, I chose not to use that category. So the statement of disbursements for the member that I worked for still was broken down into the categories that we are going to get to by the time the next legislative year starts. That will add, along with the transparency, sortable, transparent documents that are going to be posted online, will give more transparency to what we do in our member offices. So the security issue is real. If somebody isn't concerned about that, you can disclose whatever you want on each individual voucher submission now. I would urge those members who feel that that's important to do so. And in the end, I will vote no on this amendment, but again, it doesn't through a lack of appreciation for what we were able to accomplish overall. And thanks again. I yield back.
Any other members wish to be recognized to speak on the amendment? Ms. Comstock.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, I too appreciate all the hard work that the committee has done. And I just wanted to recommend, as the committee is looking through how we can do the sorting and more, have the transparency that we want and really provide the picture in a better way. Virginia has a system that's called the Virginia, it's vpap.org is the website for its access project. And what it does is it takes all the submissions that we have. This is on the political side, but it would be easily applicable for our MRA. When we submit those documents, they are almost immediately able to put them up, and they have a much better sorting system than I've seen on any of the federal databases that look at our campaign disbursements. And this is done privately by just a couple of guys. They are privately supported. They are a great resource. And so I would just recommend that the committee take a look at, it's vpap.org, vpap.org. And that website is a great model for transparency, because I know when I put my records in, I actually can see how everything is sorted and how it's spent better than we can do almost ourselves internally. They do it that well. Thank you.
Very well, thank you for those comments. Any other members wish to speak to this amendment? If there are no more comments, we'll vote on the gentlelady's amendment. And the question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady to the resolution. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed signify by saying nay. Nay. In the opinion of the chairs, the nays have it.
Could
The
I
nays
have a
it. The
recorded
amendment is
vote,
not
Madam Chair?
agreed to. The clerk will, there's a recorded vote requested, and the clerk will call the roll.
No.
Yes.
No. In the opinion of the chair, the nays have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other amendments? If not, I would move that the committee adopt the committee resolution. And the question is on the motion to adopt the resolution. And all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I would ask, first of all, unanimous consent that a joint explanation statement of today's resolution as it relates to the changes to the Members Handbook be entered into the record. Without objection, so ordered. And for all the matters that the committee has considered today, I would also ask you see that the staff be authorized to make any technical and conforming changes if necessary. Without objection, so ordered. As we conclude today's markup, I just want to say again, I know there was a lot of comment about sometimes things happening in Congress and Congress doesn't take the correct action. But I think what you saw today is really a very good government, a very good government. And this is important, I think, that the people of America see that the Congress is reacting to things that happen, that we are very desirous of having full transparency of how we utilize taxpayers' finances. And again, in a time of, sometimes people say that, the two parties can't work together. I think what has just happened here today shows that actually the two parties can work together in a very, very good way. And as we always call this the people's house, I think the people were very well served today by this resolution. And again, this won't be the end of it. This committee always is taking a look at what we're doing. Always want the largest room is the room for improvement.
Will the gentlelady yield very quickly?
Absolutely will yield.
In the midst of all of this, trying to make sure we got these changes through, I forgot to thank, and I think most of us forgot to thank, the hard work that our staffs on both sides of the aisle did in helping to make this a reality today. So I'd like to submit a congratulations to each of them for all the hard work that they put in, and my apologies for unfortunately waiting till the end of the hearing.
I'd like to join in that. Thanks for both staffs.
And I would join in that as well. And I know that on our side and on the other side, the staffs did put a tremendous amount of hours into this work product. And so it has been a truly, as I say, bipartisan and a team effort. So something I think we can all take a lot of pride in. Most importantly, the people that we serve. With that, this concludes today's markup. And without objection, this meeting is adjourned.